Good evening. I'd like to call the Board of Light and Power January board meeting to order. Danielle, would you call the roll, please?
Director Crum is absent. And Director Knoth is absent. Director Polyak.
Here.
Director Welling.
Here.
Chairperson Westbrook.
Here. Can I get a motion to excuse both Director Knoth and Director Crum for personal reasons?
I'll make that motion.
Motion.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Danielle, would you call the roll, please?
Polyak.
Yes.
Welling.
Yes.
Westbrook.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is to approve tonight's meeting agenda. Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Second, any discussion on the agenda? Call the roll, please.
Polyak.
Yes.
Welling.
Yes.
Westbrook.
Yes. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, at this time, this is one of two opportunities to hear from the general public. We ask that each commenter provide their name and address and any affiliated organization that they may be representing for the record. We respectfully ask that it's limited to 3 minutes. Austin will be our timekeeper. Any public comments? Chip?
Jim Hagan, 400 Lake. What I'd like to do tonight is to actually, which we don't do a lot here, is to congratulate Consumers Energy on starting up their 250 megawatt solar project at the old or part of the wastewater treatment up there in Moreland County. And this is a large array. I don't know. I sent an email out with some of the photos. It's very interesting looking at the construction. You can see why they chose that particular type of array. Single columns pounded down, single rotating pipe. The panels are First Solar. They're 450s. They're series I think 7 bifacials, and they don't have aluminum frames on the outside. So they're integrally made, and they've got back struts on them that just pretty much slide up and bolt in. So I can understand why Burns and McDonnell, designed it like that. It's, they mention that it's the best levelized cost of energy that of any of the solar projects out there. So I would just encourage the BLP and the board to look at it. It's a huge chunk of energy that they put up there relatively quickly, inexpensively, and I think it's definitely worth looking at. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Any? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
Motion.
I'll second.
Second, discussion? Hearing none. Danielle, would you call the roll, please?
Polyak.
Yes.
Welling.
Yes.
Westbrook.
Yes. Moving through the agenda, next up is approving purchase orders. Can I get a motion to approve the one PO in the total of $125,739?
Make the motion.
Oh, excuse me, two POs
Two.
in the total of $125,739.
I'll make the motion.
Motion,
Second.
second,
At this time, you can see one of the POs there is for a change order for Harbor Drive, so I figured we'd take a second and have Austin give an update on the construction progress down there.
Yes, so just a little update on Harbor Drive. I know everyone's eager to understand where we are and what the rest of the project looks like. So I guess just to get straight to the point of the PO there, this is the change order for all of the additional labor that we had trying to get that wire in from Columbus down to Franklin. Finally got that through, got it all straightened out. So this PO there is just for that additional cost. What's not reflected there is some additional costs that we had in-house, actually installing some new cabinets, digging some trenches, actually burying some wire ourselves. But that's much smaller compared to what we're looking at here. As far as update on project schedule, we did have a few more difficulties with some of the pipe that Kent Power had installed at the very south end of the project. Just a little bit of a delay in them trying to get the wire through. So we did have another bit of a slowdown in December. That combined with freezing temperatures, and if you can imagine, the lubricant inside the pipe doesn't work very well when it's frozen either. So all of that to say, we're a few weeks behind the last update I had given you. At this point, it looks like we should be wrapping up end of February, maybe the first. They're pushing really hard to be done. They're as excited to be done with the project as we are. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Did want to show this one image while we're talking about it, just to kind of show some of the work that's really involved there. This is in front of the piano factory building, where we actually had to add those additional cabinets to make pull points to get that difficult section of wire in. So this is our in-house tree crew. They did the trenching, they set the cabinets. Our guys kind of busted their tails to try to get this done at the last minute, try to control our costs and do it right. So I want to give a big thank you to our team to make that happen on one of the coldest days of the year, by the way. So thank you.
You can see in the picture there, there's quite a bit of snow, as you can imagine what it is working next to the river in, teen digits with wind whipping off the river. So as Austin said, our guys did a good job there, and Kent Power everybody wants to work in Grand Haven when it's sunny and warm, but it's not a fun place to be when it's cold and snowy. So they're very excited and pushing very hard to get done as well. So the big takeaway, I think, is yes, we're behind, but we are still going to hit the schedule of being done before the tourists come back. Maybe we'll have a little bit of grass planting to do, maybe some sidewalk type replacement work. We'll have to wait for the weather to break, but we should have our new underground in, poles removed, all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully when everybody comes back and you can enjoy the beautiful sunny weather on Harbor Drive, it'll be a different view.
Excellent. Thanks, you guys.
The integrity of the cable?
We've done a few tests on it. Doesn't appear to be any issues with that. And they're doing all the final tests this week and next week. So
750 is pretty big. I know when we did the 500, that went pretty good through the 6-inch conduit. And that's probably the issue here, is that this was just a little bit bigger. That 750 is a little stiffer. And
well, we intentionally designed it to get the poles as long as we thought we could, because the longer the poles, the less cabinets. So if you're trying to do a project like this, where part of the reason is beautification, not the only reason, but part of the reasons were, right? You don't want to litter a bunch of poles and take those out to litter with a bunch of boxes. So you get it if you want to, because I know you're into that kind of thing, Mike, but yeah, it was difficult, and trying to get that through there, we pushed it to the envelope, and it didn't work out the way we anticipated. So we had to add a pull point is basically what we did.
done this hundreds of times, and this is probably the most difficult one we've experienced. And it seemed to be second nature, and then to have these many problems, it was uncharacteristic, I thought, but
We're all surprised.
it's 750. It's big cable.
And as you know, we've done this other places with other utilities and stuff like that. So we were surprised. Our engineering contractor was surprised. Kent Power, the installation contractor, was all surprised. We were all like, why are we having these issues? But we dug into it and figured it out and got it fixed. So
A lot of our 750 is direct buried. It isn't in conduit, so.
Well, thank you very much for the update. Happy to hear, not happy to hear we're over, but the project getting extended into January and February is not ideal when it's outside, and appreciate the hard work of the team getting that taken care of, and looking forward to the holes being down in March for the spring. One more PO on here. You want to talk about the
I can give a quick on that. Once again, this is some directional boring for long story hopefully here is we had a project we were planning to do in the Waverly area here, Waverly, Beech Tree, that kind of quadrant of town there. And we bid that out last spring, and the price came in higher than we had budgeted. So we decided to try to tackle some of that work in house. So this is us continuing to chunk away at that. So our line crew's been doing a good job of doing a lot of backyard rebuilds and et cetera. But in order to facilitate that, we've got to get pipe in the ground so we can put some of this stuff underground. This is just cost for adding that directional boring to add that conduit in the ground. So we're continuing to pick away at it, and we're going to bid out the portions that a little bit more than we want to try to handle in-house, this spring again but we think we've cut the project down enough that we'll be, able to handle that if in the budget process.
Thank you, Rob. Any other comments before we vote? Hearing none, Danielle, would you call the roll, please?
Polyak,
Yes.
Welling,
Yes.
Westbrook.
Yes. Rob's got a presentation on strategic planning.
Yeah, so in your packet, you'll see that I gave you a memo outlining the steps staff has kind of gone through over the last few months to solicit a consultant to help facilitate our upcoming strategic planning process. So we really went out and solicited bids from 3 very qualified firms. We did some research to make sure that either people we have used in the past or other neighboring utilities have used. And once again, not a bad selection. All these are very qualified firms. So it really came down to price and I'll call familiarity with the consultant. So Steve Vandermeer did come out on top on that. If you want to go to the next slide there, Austin. You can kind of see here's a little bit of a bid tab we put together for you. Steve Vandermeer, if you guys remember, that he's the guy that did our governance training. He also did our strategic planning the first time the Board of Light and Power did it back in 2017. So he's very familiar with the Board of Light and Power. He's a Michigan native. He actually has a relative, I believe his sister lives in Spring Lake. So I think he really wants to come back in the area too and do some work. But so anyways, his costs came in lowest and he's obviously got a lot of familiarity, I think, between the board and himself. So we thought it would be a kind of the best solution to go that route. So with that said, I kind of put the next slide is putting together a kind of a timeline to let everybody know what are we getting ourselves into or how do we see this going forward. So you'll see a couple of these things that we'll talk about again later on. So what are we doing here in February to get this is we've got today, we're trying to get a recommendation to the board, get your approval to enter a contract with this consultant. And then we're going to go into collecting more data from our stakeholder process, right? So we have some things in there, coffee with general manager, some community forums coming up. You'll see in February, we're planning on having a kickoff call. So that would be executive staff meeting with the consultant to make sure we're all on the same page to maybe start picking some dates, times, et cetera, to move forward. You'll see in March, we're going to move into some more community outreach. So we're going to have a key account luncheon. So if you remember, every year staff typically goes around and meets with our key accounts. So this year we're going to try to do it a little differently to solicit a lot more input. So we're planning to put together a luncheon, time and date to be determined. But that's our game plan to kind of cover all of our key accounts meeting in one big meeting and start getting their input to the strategic planning process. Then in March, we're going to have a virtual workshop with the facilitator. So we will be able to take all that information we gather from the public. You know, that's our community forums, that's our open house, that's our survey we did, the key account luncheon. And we want to get all that information to that facilitator so we can start having those conversations about some SWOT analysis, et cetera, so on and so forth. So when he does come to town in April, the plan there is to have a 2-day session with the consultant. The morning of the first day will be staff strategic planning. So staff, its supervisors, et cetera, will meet with him to try to go over some SWOT analysis and make sure we're all looking at the same areas of priority, strategic areas of priority, what our goals in those areas should be, et cetera. That afternoon, we're planning to have at least a 4-hour workshop with the board to do the same thing. So you get all the information from the public, staff, and the facility, kind of boil it down so that we can do the best use of time with the board, get your input, review it, go all that way. That'll be the day 1 afternoon. Once again, date and time to be determined. So we'll be working with you to get that on the board, on the schedule. The second day of that meeting would be mostly with staff, kind of working through putting together the draft, setting goals, once we know our strategic priorities, the goals, which way we want to, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make these goals happen? So we'll work on that through that day and then throughout the rest of April. So in May, you see, I've got 2 things there. One we just got scheduled is May 7th. We're looking at a joint city BLP meeting, and I'll bring that up again later in the meeting. But then for the May 21st board meeting, having a draft plan. A strategic plan for you guys to review, give your feedback, make sure we capture everything from our meetings, et cetera, and then bring it back to you in June for final approval. So we've got, you know, a 6-month process here laid out, and this is kind of your timeline to kind of start putting in your head what we're going to require out of you, out of us, and how we're going to get across the finish line. So with that, I just entertain any questions on the solicitation process or any questions about Steve or what we're planning to go forward here.
I get a motion to accept the strategic planning proposal for Steve Vandermeer for strategic planning.
Make the motion.
Motion, second, discussions or questions for Rob?
No, I feel real comfortable with Steve after going through the training process that we had with him. I almost feel like I know the man already. And with his duty of care, duty of obedience, and what was the other one? Duty of loyalty. Yeah, at the core of his training process. Yeah, I feel very comfortable and looking forward to meeting him in person now instead of just on his training program. Yes.
Yeah, I've got a lot of confidence in Steve too. I think he's been out in person before doing some governance training as well. So glad to see he came in as low bid. So good. Vote. Danielle, would you call the roll, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Welling,
Yes.
Westbrook.
Yes. Think,
Okay, next item on the agenda is a community solar discussion. So I'm going to set the table a little bit, then turn it over to Eric to kind of give you a presentation on where we're at. But tonight, I want to make very clear that we're not asking for the board to make any formal decisions. We're kind of at a crossroads, and we want to get a nod in the direction we want to move forward. So anything that we discuss here tonight will obviously have to come back to the board for formal ratification. You know, some things we're trying to get to is building the contract documents for people to participate. You know, going out for bid for the actual design and construction of the solar facility, land clearing, et cetera. You know, and there's a lot of other things that we're moving at the same time. You know, planning to go to the airport board later this month to talk with them. Still working on the land. And then hopefully the first meeting in February going to city council with that and hopefully asking them to approve some sort of an easement on that property to allow us to do what we need to do to do that installation. So there's a lot of things moving on, but it's a good time to, like I said, we're at a crossroads here to talk about where do we want to go and make sure we're all on the same page as we're starting, some of these details are starting to firm up. So with that, Eric?
Local solar is one of those things that kind of comes up from time to time. And the difficulty in Grand Haven is there's not a lot of land. And so you really are limited in what you can do. And we've pretty much fleshed this out to the point where really the only option is a community solar garden type of option. Go ahead and next slide, Austin, please. So we asked our community, can you shrink that down just a tad? So we asked our community in the last survey that we conducted, I guess it was the early part of 2025, 3 questions. And the first one was, what's the likelihood of you actually installing solar on your house? And it was overwhelmingly probably not, right? We're not going to do it. It's costs are too high. Variety of reasons. You don't want to put it on your roof. You may have trees. You may rent. It's just not good for your individual scenario. And that's not real surprising because, you know, out of the 12,000 plus residential customers we have, only 31 have chosen to install solar on their house. Our rates are low and our average usage per customer is really low. So that there's a lot working against them to try to do it on their own. So we said, okay, well, if you're not going to do it yourself, would you be willing to invest in a local community solar project? And before we asked the question, we defined it for them by saying a utility-sponsored solar energy installation in which the utility's customers can purchase solar panels within that installation array. Implementing such a program would give all electric customers the opportunity to invest in solar energy, even if they do not own property, are unable to, or prefer not to install panels on their own property. Now, this was a little bit different than this was mixed at about a 50-50 with 50% saying, yeah, I might be interested in that, and 50% saying probably not. So to put it in perspective, we had 518 respondents, and that is way, way more than you've ever gotten back on a survey instrument. So we had a really good participation. We asked the following question: for those of you that might be interested, what would your price point be? How much would you be willing to pay? And understandably, and we gave them a criteria of a 15 to 20 year payback. If this thing could pay for itself in 15 to 20 years, what would your price point be? And understandably, a good portion don't know, 40%. And as you'd expect, the percentage goes down as the price per panels go up. And that's going to be important in some later discussions that we have tonight because costs are going up for solar. We also asked this same question from our commercial customers, which is the next slide. Now, we only had about 58 commercial or industrial customers participating, and I hate to say it, but that's about the norm. It's a tough group to get to participate. That's pretty much where you fall in most categories, and almost same exact response. High percentage, almost 80% again, no, they're not going to be putting it on their businesses. Same thing when we asked about a community solar garden, 50-50. Might be, and 50% just really not interested. As you'd expect, businesses are obviously probably willing to pay more, and so their price points were a little higher, but still a high percentage of don't knows. Next slide. There's some models out there in the state that we can look to, and that's what we've done to kind of get a feel for if we were to do something in Grand Haven, how would we structure it? And what are the pros and cons of some of the installations that are already out there? What do we like and what would we not do? How would we not set up the program? So I just got a couple simple examples. One is in Marquette, Michigan. It's a 0.151 megawatt solar array that was developed by the Board of Light and Power themselves back in 2017. So it's a while ago. Costs were quite a bit different back then. Panels were 480 total panels at 320 watts per panel. And how their system was structured is the subscribers or the participating customers had to pay an upfront cost of nearly $500 per panel to own that panel for 25 years. The panels that were not subscribed initially, so they had a percentage rate that they had to achieve before they move forward with the project, but those remaining panels could be purchased at a later depreciated value. The initial credit applied to the electric bill was 6.33 cents per kilowatt hour. In the contract, it was clear that that value could change, and in fact, it has. Currently, it's at 5.45 cents per kilowatt hour. You might be wondering why that is. Well, they have the ability to generate their own power, so they can control that. And right now, it's cheaper than 6.33, so they've lowered it. The credit can carry over monthly, but it cannot carry over annually. The BLP is not required to remove snow from the panels. Customers can transfer ownership if they move to a new location on the system, or they can donate it to a nonprofit. But the BLP, the Marquette Board of Light and Power, because we're a BLP also, the Marquette Board of Light and Power does have the option to purchase the panel back at the depreciated rate. This last bullet point, I think this is important because you're going to see a reoccurring theme from the other two case studies. The customers acknowledge and agree that participation is not an investment and has not been promised or led to expect any profit from the project. And for anybody who wants to learn a little more, on the bottom left-hand corner is the website address if you wanted to go there and research that a little more on your own. The next project is in Lansing, Michigan, and that is a 0.315 megawatt solar array. And just to put some of these into perspective, out of those customers that I mentioned that had net metering, we have a total of 42 net metering customers. The total megawatts is 0.4 megawatts for the inverter sizing. And they're not getting that all the time, obviously. So to put that in perspective, if it's 0.4 on the net metering, this array is just slightly under what we currently have installed on or what customers currently have installed on our system. That was developed by Community Energy Options in 2019. That's 1,000 panels at 315 watts per panel. Now, how they structured that deal is the Board of Water and Light signed a power purchase agreement with Community Energy Options. And all BWL participating customers provide the full upfront payment. In this case, it was almost $400 for a 25-year lease of the panel. The requirement was they had to have an 80% subscription rate prior to the project moving forward. Now, their deposits were refundable. So they took the deposits, put them in escrow. And if they didn't achieve the 80% subscription rate, they just refunded the deposit. Well, they sold it out. It was built. Their initial credit applied to the electric bill was 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And the criteria on that is it escalates at 2.3% per year. But their credits cannot carry over to subsequent billing cycles. Again, similar to Marquette, customers can transfer the lease if relocating on BWL electrical system, or they can donate to a nonprofit if moving off the system. But there isn't a mechanism where BWL will purchase that lease back from the customer. Similar language, their disclaimer is the lessee acknowledges and agrees lease is not an investment and has not been promised or led to expect any profit from the lease of the solar panels. And I think this next case will really kind of hit home as to why that is. So this last example is Cadillac, Michigan, and that's a 0.5 megawatt solar array developed by Consumers Energy in 2021. There is no upfront requirement to purchase these panels or lease, but it does require a 12-month commitment. You've got two options. You can buy a solar block, which is sold in increments of 0.5 kilowatts, and the monthly fee is $8 per month. The monthly credit a customer could expect to receive is $3.18 per month, which is the average of their 2024 credit from Consumers website. So they pay $8 and they get a credit of $3 and nearly 20 cents. You can buy a micro block sold in increments of 0.15 kW, and that monthly fee is $2.40 per month. And the monthly credit is just a little under $1 per month. And that was the average credit for 2024. Their credit structure is priced at 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour for years 1 through 5. And then the disclaimer is subsequent years will be based on market value and energy and capacity. Now, a customer is automatically removed from this program if they move out of the service territory. And I like their disclaimer language, probably the best of all three. This voluntary program is not designed to reduce a participant's electric bill. Rather, it offers an opportunity to voluntarily participate in a program that generates clean energy. So I think they did a very good job setting expectations up front. And again, the website is at the bottom left-hand corner if you wanted to look into that more. So if we were to move forward with a community solar project in Grand Haven, I think setting those expectations early on is important, that this would be a community project. It's not a power supply hedge or a financial investment. There's no place where we can do a large scale solar. It'll be a small array. It will be more costly. And making sure everybody understands that right out the gate is going to be very important. Now, if we were to do something, a size range between 0.3 and 0.5 megawatts is where we're starting our evaluation. Project cost for the 0.5 megawatts, and we have met with solar developers, it's approximately $1 million, and that's front to back. So the construction costs are $800,000, but you've got inverter replacements, you've got tree removal, you've got demolition. There's just a lot that goes into these over 20 years. So it's a little more than just your initial construction costs. We would anticipate a 20-year lease due to the life of the inverters. We don't want to put our customers in a position where if the inverters only last 10 years, in year 20, if you did a 25-year lease, then you're going to be replacing all the inverters just for maybe 5 more years of commitment. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Now, if the project goes longer, great, right? If everything lasts longer, it's good. Just automatically extend to the project end of life. This next one we'll talk about in a future slide, but the full lease payments due up front, that's a really appealing option. But we'll talk a little more about that in a couple slides down. We would look at a fixed credit somewhere around 6.385 cents per kWh. And that's based on the cost of our most recent solar project. So that's really about as good of a deal as you can give them, because that was an economics to scale project. Whitetail Solar just went online in November. The credit would be based on a fractional share of project output based on the number of panels they decided to lease. Or if we decided to do a fractional percentage of the project. credit offset would only apply to the energy charges and would not exceed the dollar amount of corresponding monthly electric consumption. What that basically saying is, they can't use it against their fixed cost. It's just energy. RECs would be retired by the VLP annually. Not sure that's a big deal from a residential perspective, but for commercial and industrial customers that have renewable portfolio standards they have to meet, we would have to retire those RECs so that they could get the benefit or the credit for whatever requirements they have for their businesses. Keep in mind, we'd have to be required to insure, maintain, and demo the project, and we did include that in the cost. We would not anticipate removing snow in the wintertime. That we don't have staff for that. We're not staffed to that level. And if they're not doing it in Marquette, we probably don't need to do it down here. Customers can transfer ownership if moving off the BLP system. We do like that option, but they would not be eligible for payment from the BLP. That seems like it'd be hard to do a community project if we had to pay them back if they moved off system. They're making a commitment, and how they want to transfer that commitment, if they wanted to do it to a nonprofit, that's a nice option. We like that. So on the next slide, just to give you guys an idea of where we're looking, and Rob has been out pounding the pavement, trying to see what options we do have available to make something like this go. He's done a good job working with the airport board, and there's a possibility, and there's some discussions that have to have further than this, but there is 8 acres of just nothing but trees near the airport property. Trees aren't good around an airport, so removal of those trees might not be a bad thing. It is outside the runway protection zone. We would have to work through some level of easement from the city council, so they would have to be on board that this is a good project for the community as well. It will require Federal Aviation Administration review, but we have read the guidelines for that. And these are pretty common projects around airports. You just got to stay out of the RPZ. The BLP would clear the trees on the parcel, which is a fairly substantial cost, but there's going to be some cost to an easement. So that's something that hopefully can be negotiated. And it would give us enough room if this thing was a slam dunk and people wanted more, you could do a second phase. So it would allow for future expansion. Next slide. So why we're talking about this tonight is we have met with solar developers, and we do have some indicative pricing. The cost of solar installations, they have increased in recent years, but there was 2 things that really made this attractive to look at last year when we started the discussions. And the big one was a Solar for All program. And it was a grant, a pretty sizable one, that made a project like this pretty attractive, even with the increased prices. And that was going to run out till 2029. So a substantial amount of money. Well, that was terminated in mid-year last year. So a huge incentive or a huge cost reduction for a project like that went away. Now, there is still one other option, and this is why we're talking about it, because this is changing as well, is the investment tax credits. And this is kind of an odd one because municipal electric utilities typically don't get these kinds of, we don't pay taxes, so we don't get tax credits. But under this rule, we do, but that rule is sunsetting. And for projects that don't begin construction by July 4th of this year, the wording is a little clunky, I apologize for that, they have to be completed before the end of 2027. If you don't start them by July 4th, you're not eligible for the 30%. It kind of goes down at an escalated rate. It's going to dry up. And so with the Solar for All program going away, a lot harder to move forward, but there's still some substantial direct pay refunds that are at least worth considering and worth the discussion. Next slide, please. So obviously our de facto option is do nothing, right? That's where we're at today. But if we did want to consider going down a path such as a community solar garden, there's really 2 options that lay in front of you. The first one is build first and sell your subscriptions later. The pros in that scenario would be to take advantage of the tax credits that are going to end soon. It does provide the lowest cost option for a local solar project at this time. It does get a small local solar project developed, and it allows the ability to add additional phases in the future. Now, there's some drawbacks to this option, and the big one is it's an unknown level of participation. And if you build it and then ask for subscriptions, are people really going to come and subscribe since it's already in the ground? It's a pretty big thing to consider. You assume the BLP assumes all the risk if you do it in this option, if you build first and sell later. So if that was the option that was chosen, we would say, let's limit the scope of the project to a reasonable investment, 0.3 megawatts. And that way we're limiting our risk. If we do that, though, that schedule is pretty tight. So we would have to get that ball rolling and get it rolling fairly quickly. It can be done. We got to move. We would have to, in January 2026, submit requests for proposals for land clearing and project development. And next month, we would be coming to you and bringing a recommendation that would need to be decided on. And then we would have to work pretty quickly with the city to determine the land easements and reach an agreement on that. We do it that way. In spring of 26, we would begin land clearing and we'd be ordering equipment and developing program participation documents. The second option, can you shoot to the next one, please? So lock it up.
There we go.
Okay. Second option would be sell subscription first, build later. The pros on that is the BLP is taking little risk under that approach. We threw a number of requiring at least half subscription rate before proceeding, but that's really would be a board decision on what level. We'll make a recommendation, but we just started with that. It allows for a potentially larger project too. In that scenario where you're, trying to get the subscriptions first, you've got greater certainty going into it. The downside to that is tax credits wouldn't be available. It's really a cost to the participants, not so much as a cost to the utility. So the cost of participation is just going to be higher. Now, if we go down that path, the schedule is much more flexible, as you can imagine. February 2026, we would try to work with the city council and see what their temperature is for doing something like this, if this is something that they would support. In the spring, we would still submit requests for proposals for land clearing and project development, and with an understanding that the cost would have to be cost to construct in 2027, and that allows us over this summer to develop the program documents, contracts, and begin soliciting panel lease agreements with customers. So that's all we have for you guys, and we'll turn it over to Rob, and so you guys can discuss how you would like to proceed.
Thanks, Eric. From there, I kind of want to facilitate a discussion and kind of go through and maybe reiterate some of the things what I think are the big bullet items and try to get, like I said, a nod from the board to where we want to go. First thing I'm going to say is notice there's no option 3 here where we're saying mothball the project. I think we heard through our survey and through other avenues that there is an interest in this community. And I think we've made a commitment to the community that we will run this ball out and at very least bring it forward and see where it goes from there. Because once again, it is a community project. So with that, I would want to make sure everybody hears that loud and clear. But if we can go back to Austin, the BLP concept approach slide. So these are some of the things that are either way we go, we need to have some answers for some of this stuff because we're going to have to write lease agreements. So we've done research on it. We think we have a good idea which way we should go, why we should go that way. But before I spend a bunch of time and effort putting those together, I want to make sure that the board understands it, agrees with it, likes the direction we're heading. So I think the project size, I think we've talked about that of 0.3 to 0.5 megawatts. That kind of gets us in that range of what you're seeing for others. Maybe 0.5 might be a little big. So, I mean, there's wiggle room to have this discussion later on is like maybe if we want to make sure we can get this thing built, that maybe we bring that size down because that would mean we'd need less people to participate. So it's open to your input, but that's kind of where we started. As you can see, 0.5 is the size Consumers Energy did. So it might be a little big. 0.3 is the 300 kW that we're talking about in Lansing. So, we're still in that same community size. One thing that we talked about is we're talking about these tax credits. tax credits are 30% of the construction cost. So we keep talking about project cost. That is the life of the project. What is it going to cost me to demo it? O&M, et cetera, right? That's the full project cost. But what, I can only get 30% tax credits for stuff for the construction. Think of it at your house, right? You get 30% tax credit for putting solar panels on your house. You don't get 30% tax credit for building your house, the whole house, just for the portion of the solar panels. Does that make sense? Same thing here. The developers we've talked to, around $800,000 is what they were telling us for a cost for a 0.5 megawatt or 0.5 megawatt system. So that translates into about $260,000. So that's really what we're talking about when we talk about tax credits. It's not 30% of the whole project, it's 30% of those construction costs. Once again, a couple of these items go together. We did a 20-year lease because if you think about all the PPAs we're doing, we're trying to do this as fair and as transparent as possible, that we do 20-year PPAs for solar. Because the developers know that's a good, usable project life. Will this probably last longer than 20 years? Probably. Hope it does. The longer it lasts, the better it is for the investors, right? The better it is for us. But we want to guarantee 20 years. And like Eric said, extend it as long as that project is still viable. Let people still take advantage of it. Why rip something out of the ground that is still working, right? So that's our idea there. That kind of links into that fixed credit cost. Like Eric said, once again, that's based on our most recent market analysis, right? The last one we did, this was the price. So we're going to pass along the same price that we're getting to our customers. And that's a fixed cost for the next 20 years. You're buying now and you're going to be fixed for that 20-year contract. So we're not asking to change it anywhere else because that's the same contract we just signed. So I hope that makes sense. The full lease payment due up front, we say to be determined. One, we need to know what the actual project cost is to figure out the dollar value, but also two is some of the pros and cons of build now, sell later. I get some certainty, right? I can go build those costs out. When I'm trying to sell these leases, I know exactly what it's going to cost, right? If I do sell first, build later, we're going to have some variability in there because guess what? Cost of solar panels are going to change in the next 6 months. Just the way life is. So when we talk about selling later, which keep in mind, option 2 is what we're talking about there. That's what we've been telling everybody from the get-go. That's our status quo. Sell first, get participation, then make a commitment once the community makes a commitment. We would have to write our RFPs, et cetera, to reflect that. The thought process we're kind of thinking at this time would be that we would try to lease these panels through 26, the calendar year 26. And whenever we hit that subscription rate that the board decides is what we want, we'd pull the trigger. If we don't hit that subscription rate by the end of 26, we would refund everybody's money because the project didn't go. Because you got to put, when we start talking to contractors and developers, we've got to put a back end on it. We can't hold this thing open for 6 years while we try to do something. So we have to set that. So that's kind of in our mind what we're thinking is if we do that path, let's go ahead, get a budget together, get a cost together, go out and try to lease these panels, but then hold that open until we reach that, or at the end of 26, we'd have to say it's just not going to go. Go back to the RECs we were talking about. Our thought process there, once again, we can't open up, we retire RECs in a MyREC system. Let's say we've got 50 people that want to, we can't have 50 MyREC accounts. So to our point, I don't think that makes much difference to the residential customer, but to our C&I customers that might have sustainability goals, it does, right? They want those RECs. We could work with those individuals and retire them on their behalf. So I think there's an easy way for us to do that. We already do that with our VGP program or voluntary green pricing. We retire the BLP RECs here, and on a separate line item, we retire those as voluntary green so that people can see those are the RECs we retired for you. Once again, some things we got to talk about is we need to make sure we're ensuring this, maintaining it, demo it. That is the difference between construction cost and life of project cost. Going into, I think there's been some questions. How will this actually work if I buy a panel or lease a panel? I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. I know they don't mean the same thing, but for this discussion, I'm trying to use them interchangeably. You're making a commitment to buy a certain percentage of the output of this project. And we can divide that however mathematically we want. Other places have done it per panel. But if you look at some of the other ones, their panels are smaller than what the current panels are going for. Some of those were down at 300-watt territory, right? So the cost could be lower. Nowadays, they're up at 500 to 600 watts per panel. Well, just by math, that's probably going to be about twice as much. So do we really want to say per panel or per percentage? I think percentage makes sense. Because what are we going to do when we actually get the meter reads at the end of the month? If that solar panel puts out 100 kilowatt hours and you have 1%, you're going to get 1 kilowatt hour credit on your bill, right? So we'll do that math, but I think conceptually we're telling you people need to think about it as leasing a panel, but you're actually just owning a percentage of the project. Trying to be transparent, but I don't think anybody cares other than us, but I got to make sure everybody understands it. Transfer of ownership. So if you buy that, what we're talking about here is we think we could write something up that says, if Rob Shelley buys this, he's going to get that credit on his bill. If I move from one end of town, from the east end to the west end of town, I have the option to either take it and take it to my new home. I could leave it on the old home as a sale, like you would solar panels, right? We'll just get credit on the new person's bill. Or if you say, I'm leaving town altogether, have you donate it to a nonprofit? I think that's a good way to, then we could credit that to, let's say, the Salvation Army's bill or a local church's bill or something along those lines. So you're making an investment, a commitment for 20 years. You kind of own this, and we will let you decide at that point how you want to transfer it. But you only transfer it to yourself, to the new homeowner, or to a nonprofit. We can't have it just, well, I think Director Welling's a really nice guy, I'm going to give him my solar panel. You can't gift it. You gotta transfer it in a certain way, if that makes sense. So I'm going to stop there and ask for a little bit of feedback, because once again, these concepts we need to nail down regardless of which option we go in project schedule.
Anyone want to go?
Who would the PPA be with?
There would be no PPA. We would own and maintain it, the board, light, and power. So think about it as the customer almost having a PPA with the board, light, and power for that output of that panel.
Well, how do you determine the price then? Since you're looking at, for example, if you look at the smaller project, look at what, 300 kW?
Okay, yep.
So you develop that based on what availability?
So we would develop so there's two options we'll get to. So let's say we're going to go out for a RFP, and we would ask a solar developer for a price for them to design, install, et cetera, and then turn it over to us. We would pay a contractor to do that. So the BLP would own those panels, all that after it's constructed.
Gonna let the developer decide who the manufacturer is, the supplier?
Correct, within reason. Obviously, they have to be certain things to meet with the tax credits. We can't have foreign entity of concern, what's it, FEOC, I think they call it. So we need to make sure they're gonna pick legitimate things, and we'll evaluate that proposal as they come in. So part of the proposal process will be like, tell us who you're gonna use, what panel, what manufacturer, what inverters are you going to use? What type of system is it fixed? What degree tilt are you putting it at, et cetera? What's the design output? So we'll have all those parameters come back as part of the RFP for us to evaluate the developers.
Rec's the same way as far as handling the value of a rec? Or we're gonna base looking at today's price for a rec or tomorrow's price?
Well, we would have the recs because we would own it. So we would be generating those recs as the BLP. And then we would just retire them annually on our customer's behalf. Or if, like I said, if it's a C&I customer that has some sustainability goals, if they want us to do a separate line item for them because they bought, I hope someone doesn't come to me and say, hey, I want to retire those recs individually for one panel. But, if we had someone like, I'll pick on our largest customer, Shape, which I do know they have sustainability goals, if they said, hey, I want to buy, let's say 100 kW of that facility, but I want that 0.1 rec. Okay, we'll retire it in Shape's name.
Question? I can go next. Love the work you did on all this and especially teeing up some of the other solar projects to compare and making a decision. Love that. I think that part of this is, so it looks like from our CNI and our residential customers, you know, they want to buy these, they don't want to put it on their roof, but they want to invest in a community solar. They said they don't want to spend more than $300 or $400. What does this look like? I mean, what is it? I mean, I know this is hard to estimate, but you know, if they aren't willing to spend more than $300 or $400, what's the actual amount that they would be spending? You know,
So
like if you're going to buy a fraction of a panel or a piece or a percentage or whatever we decide.
So the nice way of looking at that is you talk about a percentage of output, you can divide that cost by whatever you want. So if it's $1 million project, which we talked about, that's kind of the project cost round number for the 0.5 megawatt facility. That would be, if you said, hey, I'm going to buy 0.5%, it's $500. You want 1%? It's 1,000. So we could decide to sell it in, let's say, 0.5% increments.
Reduce the cost so people would
People could participate,
Okay.
correct? If I go on, once again, this is just one person's layout design. For a 500 kW system, they were talking around 800 panels. So a little over 500 kW per panel, or 500 watts, I'm sorry, 500 watts per panel. And if I did that, once again, if I don't do the tax credits, the total install or total project cost would put that up around $1,100. If I just want to divide by the number of panels. If I want to say, if I can get the tax credits and a grant, as we talked, you know, we've talked about trying to get a grant from the community foundation. If I can get that as well, I can bring that down to around $750 a panel. Once again, why is that number higher? Well, one, solar panel prices have gone up than the other examples we put out there. Plus, these panels are bigger. So once again, they're bigger panels that what people are proposing for this type of a setup are bigger than what normal people would put on the roof as well. So the bigger the panel, the more energy it outputs, but the less panels are going to put in. So
is there a way though that we could target something so that somebody could, I mean, we have a large amount of people who want to spend $300 or less. We don't have a lot of customers who want to spend $750. I mean, is there a way to?
well, then you take $1 million and divide it and you get 0.3%. So I think what it does is if we, and we can get into that later down below, but I'll probably preface this a little bit. If we go forward now, say tax credits are that important, we want to take on the risk. So you're locking yourself into a design in all that today, right? You don't know what the participation is going to be. You got to pick a size, you got to go forward and you got to get it done, right? The reason we're bringing it up today, and I said the term at a crossroad. If we don't start moving down this path after this meeting, there's no way we're meeting that 4th of July. Right now, the stars have to align a little bit, right? We've got to get the land. We've got to do all these other things, but we can safe harbor the project by doing a 5% spend before the 4th of July, right? But if I don't bring you guys a proposal or a contract to order material in February, if I have to wait till March, we just ran out of time. The developers I've talked to have said, if I can have a signed contract with you by March 1st, we think we can make that 4th of July schedule. If you wait longer than that, so that's why today's the discussion.
And quite frankly, part of my concern is we have nobody signed. And I mean, we don't know, you know, how many people are gonna sign up. I mean, we could say today, we're gonna go through with the project, do it all, and nobody signs up. I mean, how many people take advantage of our green energy program?
Not many.
From history, I mean, it's very, very few. You know, if the BLP is going to send money in solar, it's a much better investment to do these large utility scale solar projects than this community solar. This is a community project. for the community, and how do we know? I mean, we've asked the community what they want to spend, or if they want to do it. You know, most say yes, and how much do you want to spend? But we don't have any guarantee, knowledge, or even anything to move. Project today, it could just be a, you know, if we kind of fast track this and take on all the risk, we could end and have nobody participate. It's not a project if the community is not funding this. So that's really my concern today with the project.
And you make a good point. That's the top bullet, and why Eric was talking about the other developers. They all put in there, and like we put in there, this is a community project. That's how we've always started it from the get-go. This is not a power supply hedge. This is not a financial investment for us or for participants. I mean, that question was asked to me at the airport board. Well, the BLP is going to make money off this, right? You know, that's why you're doing this. No. In fact, we're just passing our costs directly through. So anything we can do, as I've been telling them, anything we can do to lower costs, we should probably try to do to try to get that price point down. But there's pros and cons to both. That's why we're having this discussion.
I mean,
and
the whole spirit of this thing is the communities, you know, that BFP is helping the community develop a solar garden. And we need that community participation to, you know, to verify they want to participate, they want to contribute, and they want to make this work. I mean, I'm totally sympathetic to there's money on the table that we're going to lose if we don't make this decision today, but I don't know that we've got good knowledge of what the community is willing to fund. Happen. I mean, the way the project is designed is it's partially funded by, I think we can talk about percentages. You know, I think 50% is a loft, you know, sell 50% and then we'll build. I mean, I'm flexible on that amount. Maybe it's 30% or 5%, but a 0%, that's not really a good kickoff of a community solar.
Hey, Austin, can you go to option 2 slide, please? So I think that's good points to make sure everybody understands, you know, what we're talking about here is option 2, like you're saying, the BLP takes on very little risk. Keep in mind, I will be the first one to tell you that when we started talking about this, we had the Solar for All program, and the first developer came and said, hey, let's do a 2 megawatt facility. I went, whoa, way too big. We whittled it down, kind of came up with a 500 kW, 0.5 megawatts. That was really an off the cuff guess at my point, right? So that's one thing we can talk about if we want to make sure we get prescription or participation, or maybe bringing that down. Like you talked about the subscription rate. Same thing with the 50%. I heard somebody throw that out one time. So that seems reasonable. Threw it in there. So really the question is, if we stay with option 2, we have the ability to, I'll say, right size the project, maybe to the participation we get. If right now I just go out and say, I said, no matter what, because we are taking on that risk, I will not stay at, I don't think it's appropriate to stay at 0.5 megawatt. Let's cut that project roughly in half to like 0.3 megawatts, where I came up with that number. You could go smaller if you want, if we were worried about that side of it. Or we could say, hey, let's do the cell first. Let's go down to 0.3 megawatts on that. And maybe the subscription percentage goes further down. All those are types of questions for the board. You guys are here, you're elected by our community. You're here to represent the community. They trust you to make informed, competent decisions with a very large investment in this community, right? We're a pretty big department of this community. So that's what you're here to do. So that's the question for you is, do you think the size is right? Should we try to bring that size down? To try to keep that price down? What about the subscription rate? Is it 50-50? 60-40, 30, whatever.
Yeah, I just got a few more comments
Yep.
and I'll pass it over to, I mean, as far as the size, I mean, if reducing the size gets the price down, our customer surveys said, people don't want to spend, $1,000 on these things. So thinking the size of the project to 0.3 gets that total price down and we'll get more participation makes total sense to me. I think like I said, I think the lowering the value on the, I'm a big fan of option 2. I think lowering the value of what we're going to expect on a subscription rate much lower, maybe 30% would be, 25% would be acceptable. I think the RECs being retired, certainly, Shape's got goals. I think the city may have goals. Anybody else who has sustainability goals, I think that's a great. pay credit and get the recs written off in their name. I think that's great. I think the ownership policy, I mean, I hadn't heard the details of this before, but, you know, profit versus just going back into the BL. Solid option I'd support, so.
Yeah, I really like the concept, solar garden. I was a build first, sell later, but after hearing some of these arguments, I now realize that may not be the most responsible way to go with our ratepayer money. So I guess we can go wait another month and see if we can get some more commitments from the airport board and see how it pans out with city council. And wait, let's give it a little more time.
Talking option 2.
We'll go with option 2. Yeah, I was an option 1 guy, but after hearing some of these things, I've kind of changed my mind. It's the more responsible way to go. Unfortunately, we have a time crunch with the tax credits and to keep the price down. But inevitably, yeah, I think let's stick with the our first option, and that was sell first and then build later. Option 2.
Well, that's on the percentage of subscription. I mean, if we did go with that option, I mean, what would you think? I mean, is 50% the right number? Is 25% the right? Thoughts on that? I mean,
Does it have to be cast in stone?
At some point, yes, I'd say when we go out to start selling or leasing these panels, right, you're gonna wanna be able to tell the customer, this is the line, right? So at some point, doesn't have to be set in stone now. No, that's probably a pretty easy change in the contract, but I gotta start writing contract language for these lease agreements. And that's probably gonna be put in there. Like I said, our plan would be collect money up front. So if we go the sell first option, which it sounds like kind of we might be headed that way, we would collect monies up front and we'd put them in some sort of like escrow account, holding and waiting. And if the project doesn't go, we would refund 100% of that money. But we need to tell people, we need to sell X number of panels or a certain percentage, however we want to verb it, before they're going to be a go. I think that motivates people to buy in. I mean, that was one of my concerns of going the build first route, is once you build it, you kind of lost that sales stick, right? You already got it. It's right there. Why do I need to go buy a panel? Putting some sort of percentage there, I think, is a good motivator. Once again, it also says we've got to have community participation. I think I heard somebody say earlier, what's a community project without the community? I mean, it's pretty sure. The good news here is there's not a bad option. It's nice to have to make decisions on 2 really good options here.
so I saw the 80% subscription rate. I mean, appreciate the benchmarking too on these other projects that have had some success. And I mean, the 80% was in Lansing's rate. I mean, any of the other rates, Eric, I mean, I don't think I saw any in there, but I don't know I mean, we're trying to make a decision.
Marquette had one, and don't hold me to it. I think it was 80%.
I mean, to me, lowering that rate shows, we're putting some trust that the community is if the 25% of the community is gonna, or 33% or whatever we decide is gonna sign up and spend money, we got a project that could sellable,
Well, even later on, if you're at that sell first, let's play devil's advocate and run that out. Let's say we're here in November and we set the subscription rate at, let's say 30%. We got 25% sold. There's no reason the board at that point can't make the determination, say, we're willing to do the rest, move forward. Or you can continue to toe the line and say, look, we said 30%, we didn't get 30%. I mean, you do have more flexibility the more time you take. But you lose a little bit of opportunity funding, which is not the end of the world. We throw out the term $1 million, but when we talk about power supply, $1 million is not huge. But it's still $1 million. We can't go around willy-nilly. I don't mean to downplay it, but we also got to keep it in perspective, right? When we're talking about we'll be doing budgeting here in the next month or two, and our power supply is last year was $20 million.
Like, any comments on the size of the project, option one, option two?
I like the option two, just from the fact it's gonna require the community to participate. It's easy to say anything you want until somebody says, all right, I raise you, 20. So I think that's definitely something we need to consider. And the other thing that maybe you could look at when you're putting together an RFP is to see what it would cost to maybe improve on the infrastructure as far as being able to add on. Say for whatever reason we get a lot of community participation, or we hire a consultant or somebody, somebody who sells for a living. You get that used car salesman in here and flashy jacket, and you get people to buy into it, and then we have more options. Again, it's the thing about, I have to really change gears because I'm used to working for, you had to make money. This is a service to the community, and we're looking hopefully to meet the community's need for green power. And that's a whole different business than anything else as far as the way consumers invest. Worked on that side too, and that's an entirely different game. But yeah, I think,
You're absolutely right. The mindset you're talking about is this is being, once again, I keep saying it's a community project. We wouldn't be doing this for a power supply portfolio for us. But to answer your question about making the project bigger, that's why we say the sell option, we say we allows for a potentially larger project. Let me back up. The amount of land I'm talking about there is enough to put in another phase. So if this thing sells like hotcakes, and let's say we got to 50% subscription rate in the next 2 months, and we go out and put out a 0.5 megawatt facility. Boom, good. We keep selling. We sell at that first 0.5 megawatt, and we got more people that want to do it. Let's do a phase two. The only limit we'll have based on the tax credits, is if we do tax credits, is that site has to be less than 1 megawatt. Because if you get into there, then they start going to prevailing wage issues and things, et cetera, that's just going to drive the cost up as well. So if you're at 0.3 megawatt starting point, we could have 2 more phases of 0.3, right? So the site I'm looking at, and this, I'm kind of looking at the mayor so he understands this as well, is it's sized to be able to allow multiple phases of this. So if we only use a little portion now, great. We'll have, like I said, I think there's enough room there for at least 1 megawatt of installation. Or maybe even potentially larger, but we probably would limit that site to that, which once again, I don't really foresee us getting that big anyways for a community solar garden. But you're exactly right. This is a community project. This isn't being done to make money. It's not like a PPA like you're thinking about. How am I going to squeeze every little last nickel out of this and make money? This is how do we fill a need for our community that they've told us they'd like us to try to do. So to recap, I guess we can kind of.
One more question.
Okay, go ahead.
The fixed credit, that 0.06385. I mean, one of the other utilities had a flexible amount.
Marquette did,
Marquette, I mean, tell me about that. I mean, why would they have
is they own their own generation, so they can control it.
And where we came with this fixed credit, to be clear, is you can do all sorts of market analysis and cost of solar. You've heard all these type of things. Well, we know we just signed a contract for cost of solar for 20 years, fixed rate at that level. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to copy what the people that you said that the independent power producers are coming up with. They've got all sorts of forward pricing curves, models, et cetera. And they're saying that's what the rate is today. So if we built it within the next year or so, that would be the rate we should probably consider. And it would just be locked in. Truthfully, it makes it easy on staff, right? Kind of set it and forget it.
did we give you the direction?
So I'm gonna make sure I understand. So I'm gonna recap hopefully very quickly here. We're option 2, stay the course. We're gonna sell first, build later. We like the project size of somewhere around maybe 0.3 to megawatts. Maybe we start there. Let's talk about maybe lowering the subscription rate. So with that, I guess I'll ask you guys, give me a number, what you're thinking. Are you gonna stay at 50? You wanna go down to
33?
30,
One
a
third of
third?
payments?
33.
Percent per subscription rate before we move forward. What do we want to have for a subscription rate before we move forward for a contract?
It could do enough interest.
I'd support 33.
I'm comfortable with 33.
Oh, that answers that question. We just talked about the credits. That makes sense. I think you were happy with the Rex. So, yeah, I think that gives me enough. And I guess I'm looking at Eric and Austin going.
Term.
Oh, 20-year term?
Term, sounds good.
Yep. Yeah, I think that gives us enough information to start putting the contract lease agreement together and really formulating our RFPs for not only land clearing, but construction, et cetera. So as we get those things put together, we will bring them back to the board for you to officially ratify, review them, discuss them, et cetera there. I think I heard also you guys are good with the way we were talking about the transfer of ownership. That would be built into that. You guys were good with that? Okay. Okay. I think I've got everything I need. Cool.
Guys, very much.
Good discussion.
Chairman's report had nothing, other business.
Couple of things just for everybody to be aware of. I talked about them earlier. There's a couple of community events we have coming up here soon. So I'm copying the city manager. She did a couple of coffees with the city manager outreaches to the community. I'm going to copy her and do the same thing. So I will be at the Sidebar Cafe or Odd Sides Friday, January 23rd from 8 to 9:30. And Kinsey B's Friday, February 27th from 8 to 9:30 as well. Community is welcome to come out and ask questions about what's going on at the Board of Light and Power, give us feedback, all that type of stuff. We're trying to gather information for our strategic planning as well. So the next item is we have some strategic planning community forums set up. So Thursday, February 5th and Tuesday, February 10th. Same program, same displays both times, but just two different times, two different dates for the community. So February 5th, 4:30 to 6, February 10th, 6:30 to 8. They'll be at Central Park Place, the Escanaba Room or downstairs. It's meant to be an open house type setup. So staff will be there with kind of a picture storybook of what we've done, what our strategic plan looks like today, what we've done or where we're headed with that, trying to gather community's input on what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, where they'd like to see us head in the future. Board members are welcome to attend, encouraged to attend if you're available. Not required though. And the last item made mention to earlier as well is on, looks like we're setting up a meeting for a joint BLP City Council meeting on May 7th at 6 p.m. at City Hall. So the city clerk, Maria, is working on putting all the documents together on that. And the city manager and myself will be working on putting an agenda together for the presentation for both bodies. So that's all I have.
Have one item. Just in casual conversation with person I know, they came out on their own and said what a great job that BLP does communicating. And often, we talked, the one thing you can't do enough of is communication. I've never hear anything with me. So I think that's a real plus, to have that in our quiver. And that's a plus that we need to start using now to go ahead and look at this green energy project and, start everybody's appetite saying, this is something.
Well, in that vein, just, I did go talk to the SEC, the Sustainability Energy Committee. They're planning on writing a letter of support for us for trying to get a community foundation grant. And I told them at that time, we're gonna need your help selling these panels. And they said, let us know what we can do. So we will be reaching out and working with them. So to your point, Phil, we will not be trying to do this in a vacuum. They know the people that would probably be willing to participate. And so we're gonna use our resources wisely so that we're not just blindly, fight. We want to fire for effect, not fire for, just all over the place here. We want to get that done. So thank you. I appreciate it. And that's just another thing that we're planning to try to use people that are in that space to get us across that finish line.
At this time, it's our second opportunity for public comment.
Yeah, I think the work done to date is really good on the community solar. One thing I've just want to point out is I looked at the short-term energy outlook by the EIA today, and you'll see there's a big increase of costs that are expected on electricity. And that brings me back around to the Lansing model. The 2.3% per annum, I think, is a very reasonable escalation. Trying to hold it down to 0.062, whatever it was, I don't think is a reasonable expectation. I think you need to consider what the overall cost per kilowatt hour is going to escalate. And over 20 years, it's going to probably go up by a factor of 2.5. So I think that's where the 2.3 escalation is probably coming in. So I think you guys need to go, get the spreadsheet out and start looking at that. Because holding it down, if you're reimbursing it, the 6 point whatever, and then all of a sudden, instead of us paying 15.5, 16.5, whatever we're paying now, it goes up to 26. You guys are going to be paying a lot more on all your new projects for electricity. I think if it's it doesn't make, I think the Lansing example, you guys need to look at it and give it a lot of thought. Thanks.
With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion.
Second.
Motion second. Danielle, would you call the roll, please?
Polyak,
Yes.
Welling,
Yes.
Westbrook.
Yes. Meeting adjourned.